Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here with you all this morning. Because this is an interesting discussion, but not only a discussion in theory, but also a discussion that we can turn into practice in our everyday lives with everybody that is sitting here around the table. And that makes me also so happy that we have people who know the things from the chemical perspective, because sometimes these are discussions, and yeah, I'm a lawyer myself. I can talk for hours about climate change and plastics, but don't take it from me. Take it from the experts, and also people from the beverage industry, because sometimes it feels like we are, as consumers, we are to blame. I go to the shop, I feel thirsty, I want to buy a drink. The drink happens to come in a plastic bottle. Is that my fault? Then after that, I want to dispose of the bottle. How do I do that? I look for a dustbin or a container. It ends up in the environment. Is that my fault again? We are sort of guilt-trapped in this discussion. But what is the alternative? You want me to find a tap and I should go there with my mug to fill water. You know, we're living in a society where this is what's right in our faces. But we are finding the solution, and we're finding the solution together to see how we cannot pollute the environment, but even worse, have these CO2 emissions that are linked to the production of plastic. Now, plastic is a wonderful thing, don't get me wrong. Plastic is a wonderful thing. If we wouldn't have plastic, just imagine us sitting here and everything made of plastics, or everything made of petroleum basically, of carbon, would not be there. Wow, there would be a very strange image, and maybe some of us would have less clothes than we have now. It's a strange vision. So yes, plastic is there, plastic is useful, but think of it more in circularity. It was mentioned before, circular economy. Circular economy is a way of thinking, but the word economy is important in that, because circular economy also means that it has to be profitable. Otherwise you wouldn't do it. And sometimes things are profitable in our present economy, but sometimes not, and that's where carbon credits, carbon taxes come in, to make sure that you actually have a way of making things profitable in circularity or in reduction of CO2 emissions. If I look at my own country, the Netherlands, last year we introduced sort of return money on plastic bottles, meaning if you buy a plastic bottle now in a supermarket, if you bring it back to the supermarket, you get part of your money back. It's an interesting, for us it's also part of an experiment, because it requires a lot of effort. Because what you see now actually is sometimes homeless people that are collecting plastic bottles use it as a source of income. And that's great, that's a great source of income, but it means that you have a line of homeless people in front of your supermarkets returning the bottles, and that might not, I don't know, might not be what you want either. So, we're testing, we're in this together. In the framework of leapfrogging, everybody always uses night owl and the landlines and our current mobile phones. Whereby it was useless for night owl at the time to improve their system, because it was already obsolete, and then we all went into mobile. So indeed, if you have new technologies, of making new types of plastic, of making recycling easier, of thinking in the design of products, how you can already basically make that circular, extend their lifespan, and make products more circular, then you're actually leapfrog. There are certain products that you don't have to make anymore, that you might not want to make anymore. And there are some people in this room, I don't know if they're still there, there were some people from the circularity. Well, anyway, so they know much more about that than me. But that brings me to the mangroves, because that's actually why we are also here. If you're a fisherman along the Lagos coast, you haven't asked for all these plastic bottles to be washed on your shore, and you haven't asked for the increase in sea level that is an effect of global heating, but you're confronted with that. It's interesting, I saw the point you made about the nets. Yeah, of course, the nets is indeed a byproduct of a rest of the fishermen, but it might not be your own nets, it might be somebody else's nets that end up on your beach. I had the privilege of going to mangroves in Nigeria, actually mostly in Bayelsa State, and the sheer beauty, the serenity and the beauty. Serenity is not a word that people normally link with the Niger Delta, but I can tell you, if you go in those areas that have not been polluted, in those areas the way they originally were, I think everybody would want to go there as a visitor, as a tourist. It attracts people because it's beautiful. It has an amazing natural habitat and wildlife. So the same for mangroves in Lagos State. And then there is a way, of course, of preserving those mangroves by making use of climate financing schemes. Now these schemes have to be well developed and have to be sort of approved by the authorities that be, meaning the government. We've seen some examples, not in Nigeria, but in other West African countries. We've seen some examples where voluntary carbon schemes were set up with the best intentions, but nobody had bothered to check with the government. And then it's like, okay, you've sold your credits to this organization, and maybe tomorrow another organization will use the same specific geographic area to do their own tree planting or whatever they do. And it's not certified that you are actually the only one who is entitled to these credits. So carbon credit schemes, especially the voluntary carbon credit schemes, have to be very well certified to make sure that people are not selling them or buying them double. But the great thing about these carbon credit schemes is that you're actually being paid to do almost nothing. You're paid not to produce oil, or you're paid not to cut down trees, or you're paid not to remove ecological, for example, the mangroves. So it's indeed very smart of you, my good friend, that we have this on the opening, we have this event on the opening day of the COP in Baku, because at the Conference of Parties of the Climate Convention, they're going to discuss these compensation mechanisms. And you know how these things go, and it's like, yeah, we need 100 million. And that's where we are at the moment, 100 billion, actually. A year, that's not enough. So how is these negotiations will be very interesting. So I hope at the end of this COP that at least there will be some result on the compensation mechanisms and on the carbon credit mechanisms that will be put in place, and that we can then go down to the level of the beach, of the mangroves in Lagos, and see how those can benefit from basically compensation for something that was not their fault, that they didn't create the plastics and they didn't create the sea level rising, and they have a beautiful space. Thank you once again for inviting me.
Thank you for honoring the invitation. I just wanted to say a few things, to touch on a few things that you said. You know, yeah, it's really important, like you said, that governments are involved in this conversation. You know, and also you talked about credibility. You know, how do we say this is not there, or this has not already been solved. Now, technology has solved a lot of these problems for us. We have GPS, we have blockchain technology, which is always a part of these things that we do. And I also think it is really important that this generation, they realize that, you know, the amount of, like Nigeria has our GDP per capita is below 2,000. It's really, I mean, it's really low. So for them to get to a GDP per capita that is worth it, you know, that is respectable, at their own time as well, they're going to have to really look to new and unconventional ways of creating this wealth. Because, you know, capital is created mostly by taking loans, by creating money. You know, that's how you do this, and that comes from ideas. Ideas are what it is that are able to generate this capital creation. So they're going to have to think really, really hard, really, really out of the box. Because as they saw, America produces 260 times more power than we do right now. But in 50 years, in 20 years time, 30 years time, we will have more, population will be greater than the population of America is today. So how are we going to fund that? How are we going to create these things? You know, and if you look at our resources at present, even our oil, our gas, it's still not going to give you that economy. So they are going to have to find ways to create value themselves and to protect what they have now so that we do not actually regress in our standard of living. So that's one of the things that I really want you guys to task yourselves on, because it's something that's really, really important that you're able to do.
Yeah,